Has it really been 5 years since the last Dresden Files book? Because I didn't even start the series until I already had a YouTube channel, and that was... God, I've been doing this for a while. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to talk something that I truly do love, and that, of course, is Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files, guys. Now, this first released in 2000. We got a book a year for quite a while, and there's been quite a few books that have come out. Now, with this, kind of started as like a contemporary mystery detective kind of series with a little bit of supernatural sprinkled in, but over time, it kind of evolved into one of the biggest urban fantasy stories of all time, and it has been quite a thrilling adventure so far. Now, I'd heard about this series for years, but the thing was, I never really started it because I think it was sold to me wrong. Because, guys, telling someone, oh, it's like Harry Potter for adults, that's a huge misnomer. That's not exactly how I would sell this series to somebody. But I was working my way through the wheel of time back when I first started this channel, and those books get thicker and thicker and thicker, and you need to decompress a little. I thought, what's a really good palate cleanser book? And a lot of people kept recommending Dresden Files to me, so I decided I'll go ahead and give it a try. That was in November of 2019. By September 2020, I had read the entire series up to that point of what had been released, and what do you know, today it's still the same number of books. But today, guys, we'll be talking about why I think that you should read Dresden Files. I'm not going to lie to you, it's one of my favorite series out there. So I'm going to have quite a lot of good things to say about it. But, I will be presenting some things to say, hey, maybe it's not for you for these reasons as of why you should read does dictate. But before we get into it, guys, let's talk about what is this series about. Well, Harry Dresden is the best at what he does. Well, technically, he's the only at what he does. Harry is an openly practicing wizard and supernatural private investigator in the Chicago metropolitan area. When the Chicago PD has a case that transcends mortal creativity and capability, they come to him for answers. For the everyday world is actually full of strange and magical things, and most don't play well with humans. And that's where Harry comes in. Takes a wizard to catch whatever. There's just one problem. Business, to put it mildly, stinks. So when the police bring him in to consult on a grisly double murder committed with black magic, Harry's seeing dollar signs. But where there's black magic, there's a black mage behind it. And now the mage knows Harry's name. And that's when things start getting interesting. For lost items found, paranormal investigations, consulting, advice, reasonable rates, but no love potions, endless purses, or other entertainment, Harry is the man with the magic. But magic, it can get a guy killed. That leads us into the Dresden Files, guys. It's a very, very vague description of what the series is, because like I said, it starts as one thing, and over time it kind of grew and blew up into something way, way bigger than anyone probably could have predicted way back in the year 2000. So we're going to do like we usually do, guys. We're going to talk about what makes it good or bad, and I kind of think I'm going to lean more on the good, so there's going to be a lot here. We'll start with the good, of course. With me, in this, it is well-developed characters. I'm a character-first reader. If you don't have good characters, I don't care how great your writing style is. I don't care how great your world is. I don't care if I'm not investing in your characters. Well, I think these characters, they start small and they get bigger. And that means the cast, because you will have certain characters that kind of pop up for a while as secondary characters. And after a while, they kind of move to the forefront. They become part of the main cast. And the cast just keeps growing in that way. You can go back and you can look at this series and say, wow, you think about there's some characters that are so different. They were when this series first started. Some were just children, and now they are grown up. So it's really, really just an incredible bit of growth for these characters. It just gets stronger and stronger as it does go along here. And I'm going to be honest, the character arcs in this, they're way better than a series like this needs. I really do believe that, because there are some that are just so rewarding. It's just so, you're just fist pumping while you're reading someone because they're just so good. And you think it's that some of those were like, if you guys ever watch like Buffy and you think about like Wesley Wyndham-Pryce, who started as like this sniveling little coward, and by season 3 of Angel, he's like James Bond, kind of like that. And not in an OP kind of way. I don't feel like this series really struggles with that kind of thing. I think with this, just the growth of these characters, their bravery, or what they're learning, or what their area of expertise is, it just gets better and more believable, and it endears you to them completely. I think this series also has spectacular dialogue, and that's not just, I'm not talking about like the inner monologue as much as just the dialogue between characters. It does have good monologues, of course, because this is first-person narrative, so you do hear all Harry's thoughts, but with this I think the dialogue between the characters can be quite snappy, quite catchy, and in ways it's just infectious. You just want to read more, you're laughing, you're having a good time. You feel like you're part of the conversation. That's where I'm going to say I think that Dungeon Crawler Carl fans will probably like this a lot if they haven't read it already. And I think that's just because of how absurd it can be. You know, there's several times in that book where you can hear Carl's thoughts, obviously, and he's just being so meta and just winking at the camera, basically. That's almost the way that he does it here, but more it's just like being very aware of how absurd this is, but in a good way, never in like insulting kind of way, in a way where it's like, yes, this can be quite ridiculous and quite over the top, but you should take it seriously, and it's because of this, this, and this, and you do take it seriously. With Butcher actually doing those winks at the camera, like I said, inside of Harry's head in his monologues or whatever, I think that does, it just makes this series feel kind of lighthearted and fun. And if you read as much Grimdark as I do, guys, you need some lighthearted and fun. Now, that's not to say that bad things don't happen, because they do. But for the most part in this, you're laughing. You're never lacking for a chuckle while reading this. You feel like you are hanging out with friends because his character works so good. And I don't feel like there's any wasted space on these pages. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing is a throwaway. Just a simple line in book 2 can mean something important in book 9. That's how this series does work. There's never anything that just feels like, well, that was unnecessary filler. I never feel like there's anything that hasn't had some significance down the road. And for me, that makes every book just super, super important, and nothing that you can ever just really breeze through. You can breeze through these because they are really quick. Like I said, I read the whole series in between epic fantasy reads over the course of a year, but I do think that there are plenty of things in here that if you take your time with it, you're going to catch some things that you might miss just being a surface level reader, if you are one of those. I will list the absurdities as a good thing. And the reason is because I think a lot of series, some of the stuff they do in this, every other series, it feels like that would be the jump the shark moment. You'd be like, that's just too much. I can't take this seriously anymore. With this, in the world and the rules that he sets up, it makes sense. And you say, ha, well, it's a little different, but obviously this is a world where, you know, the boogeyman, where Dracula, where vampires, where all kinds of beasties, werewolves, all these things do exist, much like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Angel Investigations, where you have all of those creatures are real things. So again, if you're like, hey, well, that wouldn't actually happen in real life. Well, you know what? The guy that runs a bar down the street won't be some kind of otherworldly being probably either. I mean, I don't know for sure. I mean, that depends on what side of the neighborhood you're growing up on. But for me, yeah, that's you can't say, hey, this doesn't make sense in a real life setting, because it is ridiculous, as a lot of urban fantasy can be. But I think that's what makes our imagination run wild with a series like this. Here, all those things and those absurdities make sense, and you love the series more for it. But what I want to say is that this series has incredible emotional depth. And it's because you get so attached to those characters. It is because the villains are so good. It is because bad things happen to good people sometimes. I do think that Jim likes to torture his readers sometimes, but like I said, you're having a ton of fun. But that's not to say there's no stakes. It's not to say that there aren't consequences for actions. There are things that Harry does where you're just like, oh, that's going to come back to bite you later. And it does. And it really, really matters. So there are huge emotional stakes in this, because there are things, like I said, you will fall in love with several characters that don't make it to the end. And it is very, very heart-wrenching. And it isn't just death. It is just some of the things that Jim puts his characters through the ringer. He can really, like, if you guys are Robin Hobb fans, you know. It's like that. He will just drag these characters through the streets and no remorse whatsoever. And you as the reader take on that emotional depth because he's developed these characters so well. But again, it's fun and you're having a good time. But when those bad things happen, when the serious moments happen, you don't get taken out of it. He's not doing any MCU humor. He's not going to hit you with a joke when things get serious. It's fun. You're laughing. You're having a good time. But when it's serious, when it's nut cutting time, it's serious. And yeah, bad things. That's all I'll say. Bad things. The series has actually made me ask, is there something in my eye more than once? But I think the mythology and the lore in this is just so good. Because like I said, it does start rather small, ground level. And by the end, I feel like you're dealing with every kind of mythology and lore you've ever heard of. Some you haven't even heard of. Some, like myself, you will find yourself going down a rabbit hole in Wikipedia researching some of these things, because he deals with every kind of culture, every kind of mythology you can think of. I mean, there's some I had to look up and be like, is he making this up or is this something based off something? And it usually is. Like, guys, if you are into like grim fairy tales and stuff, you're going to see all kinds of cool things in here. And it's got me to learn about a lot of new things as well. And I think that is just impressive that he's able to do this, because it starts at book 4 where he really just starts diving into deep lore for this series that you thought, wow, this just feels like a game changer. Now, for me, I think the series, it gets this impression of like, people will tell you when you first start. It's much like Wheel of Time fans will tell you, oh, well, when you first start, like, oh, well, 7 through 10 is terrible. With this, I'll tell you, oh, well, books 1 and 2 aren't that good. Books 1 and 2 are fine. Books 1 and 2 are fine. It's just the series gets so much better that in hindsight, you look back at book 1 and 2 and you're like, wow, that probably could have been a little bit better. But I think what I love about it is just things start small, like I said, like at ground level, and just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger in a way that it grows to make this series and this world is so massive. And it's impressive. It's really, really impressive. Like I said, for an urban fantasy series, I don't feel like you have to go as deep as he does. And I love that he gives you the option. You can be a surface level reader and just have a good time with this. If you really want to deep dive into these stories, you can. You can. I tell people sometimes, I'm like, relax, guys. We're not reading Art of War here. This is just Dresden Files. But if you want to dive that deep into it, you really can. It is a series that can be that deep when you get into like the Fae mythology and all that stuff. For me, I just have a great time with this, but I do respect and love the world and the lore that he's kind of injected into this and just made it into something so much bigger. I'll say that the magic system, it's thorough and it's consistent. You know, he doesn't have a lot of Deus Ex Machina that's just going to get Harry out of every situation. I love that it's episodic, but it's also kind of arc-driven. So it's like each book is almost like a case, as it were, or, you know, like the worst week of that year, the worst week in Harry's life of that year, because each one of these books takes place not a year apart or takes place over a year, but it is the next year. And like I said, the way I described it was very much like the worst week he's had that year. And it's one of those where like you have an open and shut case in each book, but you do have those things that keep tying the series together that's going to reward those readers. Like, do I think you could pick up book 7 on its own and enjoy it? I mean, probably. Deadbeat's a great book, you know, but I don't know. I really don't know, because I think at that point I was reading them so close together that it felt like I was watching like seasons of television, you know? So you were having new stories, but you were also having those things that connected every single book together with each one, the previous one, and it just keeps getting better and better. Like I said, watching the character growth, and that just made it so much fun. But look, this is just incredible recurring villains that I think I probably should bring up here for a second. I think that if you be it Mab or Nicodemus or John Marcone, who's one of my favorite villains in the series, I think that these characters just have so much more depth and layers than you would expect for a lot of villains. A lot of villains in an urban fantasy series, they're evil because that's what the page needs them to be. They need to be evil. They need to be swirling that mustache while they laugh. With this, it's like you see these villains have they have reasons, they have motivations, and it's not just because, like I said, you need them to be evil. That something has happened, and we get not really necessarily backstories, but you get tiny little seeds planted, and you learn things, and then you start to sympathize with them a little bit. Now, I've said one thing I don't really like is making our villains sympathetic. And now look, some of them are just plain evil, but you will find yourself being like, you know, they're making a lot of sense. They're making a whole lot of sense. And for me, I always look at like Marcone and Harry is like when Superman and Lex Luthor have to team up and they're actually a really good team, and that drives them crazy. I love that relationship. That's one of my favorite relationships in this entire story, is between our main protagonist and arguably our main villain, you know? So it just has so many layers of these villains that I just love it so much. And then they recur, they keep coming back. You think, okay, this is an open shut case. This is the big bad for this season of Buffy, right? Sometimes they do come back, you know, as Stephen King once told us. But yeah, there's some really, really great villains. But anyway, I've rambled long enough about the good here. This video is going to be an hour long if I don't keep going. How about the bad, guys? Because no series is perfect, right? Now, this isn't necessarily anything that bothers me, but it might bother you if you were kind of on the edge about this one. The humor may be too much for people. If you're one of those, I'm a super serious reader, I am adult fantasy, I don't need any of these hijinks, I don't need any of this buffoonery, I don't need any of this tomfoolery. How many words can I come up with? They're just ridiculous like that. If you're a super serious all the time reader, you thought Dungeon Crawler Carl was a little too much, yeah, this might be a little too much for you. It does get ridiculous. It does have moments where it's like, would someone do that in a real life situation? Again, with me in urban fantasy, I don't see a lot of people out there fighting vampires, so I don't know that necessarily that they wouldn't do that in real life. But there are some times where it's just like, this is like watching Looney Tunes. It can be ridiculous. So sometimes, for me, yes, it misses. There are some misses in here. It happens. I mean, a series this long, there'll be some things that don't really work. I mean, I've got reviews spoiler reviews for every single book in this series on this channel. And I will tell you the things that I don't like in there. There are some big misses for me. There's some books that I had to rank kind of low because they just really didn't click for me. But again, when you talk about the pros, they greatly outweigh the cons. But there are some things, again, like I said, if you think that the humor in like Dungeon Crawler Carl is too much, like if you're one of them fantasy snobs who thinks that you're too good for it, yeah, this series is going to be the same way. You're going to feel like that. And, I was being like that with Dungeon Crawler Carl before I got into it as well. It's going to happen. It's fine. It's not an insult to say some of us are fantasy snobs. It's not really an insult. It's just sometimes we are. We like things that make us think this is serious business. And books like this are just kind of ridiculous to people. If you're one of those who's like, you want everything to be Breaking Bad and you can't handle anything to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Charmed, then yeah, this series might not be for you. If you're just looking for Emmy Award television and you're not okay with Saturday morning cartoons, sometimes these things are going to miss for you. So that is something to watch out there for. For me, a big one that was really, really tough for me to get sold on is I'm not crazy about first-person books. First-person narratives just lean so hard into unreliable narrator and get us out of anything, whatever we want. That's tough for me. It really, really is. This is probably the least problems I've ever had with first-person narrative. I have no issues with Harry like a lot of people do. We're going to get into it. I know what some of you are saying. We're going to get into it. But for me, the only thing that annoys me that Harry does is he repeats himself a lot. And again, it's like, you guys remember in Wheel of Time where I used to say, okay, Robert Jordan, you don't have to tell me what side of the one power is the male half and what side is the female half every single book. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, look, at this point when I'm in book 9 in the series, I'm in. You don't have to keep explaining everything to me. You guys know that Harry is chivalrous. He makes sure that he tells us all the time. It's like that guy who tells you, oh yeah, all my best friends were women. It's kind of like that. It gets kind of ridiculous a little bit, and that can really, really get on your nerves. But the biggest thing is, look, you are in Harry's head. It is from his point of view. Harry loves him some women, and he has no problems telling you how much he loves women. He has no problems telling you how attractive these women are. And I think the biggest criticism I see of this series is people accuse it of misogyny, sexism, holding female characters down. I mean, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, look at Murphy. She's one of the best characters in the series. But I get it. I understand why some people, it really bothers them. As a male reader, obviously, these things don't bother me. I look at it and I say, yeah, if you guys could spend 5 minutes inside of a guy's head, you'd probably be appalled about what they think when they see a beautiful woman. With this, I get it. I do understand the criticism, and I think that he gets better with it as the series goes along. I'm not going to pretend it's not there. It just never really bothered me to the point where I was like, oh, God. I mean, when I read, God, what was that one I started reading? ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕣𝕠𝕜 series. It was Rivers of London. Now, that was just like, whoa, this guy is a freaking pervert. That was too much for me. I didn't get that with Harry. I know it's supposed to be like that noir detective. It's supposed to be like Bogart. A little bit of Bogart, a little bit of Detective Noir style, where, yeah, she walked in and she had legs that went for miles. I mean, it was supposed to be like that, I think, and it just kind of missed the mark, and sometimes people found that a little cringe. Again, it didn't bother me, but your mileage is going to vary on that one. But that is probably the biggest criticism I hear, that, and it kind of repeated lines and explanations and things that you get every book. Again, when a series goes this long, they think, hey, maybe I've got new reader on book 6 and I got to explain something to him again. I get it. But let's talk about the length of the series, because that's probably the second biggest criticism I hear. A lot of people are like, I don't want to get into a series that's 17 books deep already with an 18th book on the way in January. I get it. I understand. That held me back for a little bit. And then I started reading them in between these big epic fantasy Wheel of Time books, and I just could not get enough. I was doing 1 a month, and then I was doing 2 a month, and I was doing 3 a month. And the next thing you know, I'm caught up in real time. So with this, it's like he wrote really fast for a long time. I mean, he put out, 15 books in 14 years. He has since slowed down. Now, he said he wants this series to be 25 books. So 22 regular and then an apocalyptic trilogy, as he calls it, to conclude the series. And like I said, 15 books the first 14 years. We've had, counting the ones coming out in January, it'll be 3 books in 12 years. So yes, he's slowed down greatly. He's not quite to the point of Rothfuss or Martiner yet, because he is actually releasing books. That's important. But yeah, he has slowed down greatly, and that can be kind of concerning for people who are like, well, it's 17 books. I doubt I could get caught. I got caught up. Everyone got caught up. 5 years now, we've been waiting for another book. Yeah, you could probably get caught up faster than you think you could. So how about why you should read it, right? This is why you guys are here. Why should you read the Dresden Files? Well, I've mentioned it several times already. If you love Buffy, if you love Angel, if you love John Constantine's Hellblazer, I think this series is going to be everything you've been looking for. I also think Dungeon Crawler Carl fans will like it a lot. I bring that up because it's just like it's the new darling, and I'm reading it right now. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities between, just like how you have to like let go of some of those super serious things that you need when you're reading fantasy. But say if the only thing a Dungeon Crawler Carl chased you off is the lit RPG elements, like you don't need to know like the Dungeons and Dragons roll number and the statistics and all that stuff. This doesn't have that. He uses magic. If you want to really dive into deep about what fuego means and things like that, his spells, you can do that. If not, you can just say, yeah, he's doing magic. It's kind of like I said about Mistborn. If you want to get into it deep, you can. If you want to just say they're doing magic, and you can get along just fine without it. But yeah, I think Dungeon Crawler Carl fans will probably like this quite a bit just because of the humor and just kind of how tongue-in-cheek it can be at times. But if you're looking for the perfect palate cleanser between big books, because I keep talking about it, those huge real-time books, I was loving it. But you need to decompress between a little bit of them. If you guys are watching this video, you probably are an epic fantasy reader. You're probably using those big old door stopper books. These are so easy to read, and they're so easy to get into, where even if you say, I'm just going to read it between these, you're going to start slipping in 2 or 3 here and there, because you can finish these in a couple of sittings. That's how good these early, especially early books. They do get a little thicker as they go along, but still, they fly. They just fly by, guys. They're very, very easy to read. And I guess you got to say, if you're an audiobooker, now again, I don't audio, guys. I have listening ADD. I can't do audiobooks. But if that's one of your superpowers, you can do the audiobooks just based off of the volume of content, the comments that I get about the audiobooks, which are done by James Marshers of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame. Apparently, these are quite good. So if you're one of those people who really likes the audio, I think maybe this is a series that's supposed to be really special. They're doing a new adaptation of it on graphic audio. That graphic audio is the ones that do the sound effects and the music or whatever. That's coming out here in like a week, book number 1, and book number 2 later this year. So to me, it's like that's going to be bringing a whole new legion of fans to Dresden Files, potentially. And I'm hoping that they do give it a try. But again, if you are an audio person, I've heard nothing but great things about the audiobooks. I can neither confirm or deny because I don't do them, but I don't think you have to go very far to find someone who would tell you how great the audiobooks are for this series. Now, this series, I think, is the rare occasion. You'll hear people say sometimes, oh yeah, that series gets better and better as it goes along. This is the first one where I feel like that's true. I don't think books 16 and 17 were the best in the series, but I do think from 3 to 15, I think every book was maybe topping the previous one. Now, I have my favorites. You go through it, and I'll be like, okay, well, look, here's my top 5. And it wouldn't just be like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It wouldn't be like that. But what I mean is just like this series just stays consistently good. It keeps finding a way to one-up itself in the best ways. It just keeps getting better. It keeps getting deeper. It keeps getting just more and more serious, but also still just having a blast the whole time. It's a series where I feel like nothing else has done that. Usually as a series goes this long, it gets a little long in the tooth, and the author hits paycheck stage, and they're not really putting their heart into it. It seems like he's still really trying hard and still really giving us the best that he's got. This series just gets continually better, and it is just great the whole way through. And that's very hard to do, I feel like, especially when a series gets this old. But again, if you are like me and you read a lot of grimdark fantasy and you need some sunshine in your life, yes, this has bad things, but this is going to have you having a whole lot of fun along the way. And I think it's something that we all need. We all need a little bit of enjoyment, a little bit of fun once in a while. So if you bounce off Dungeon Crawler Carl because of those things I talked about, but you still like the fun side of it, I think Dresden Files will give you everything that you do need. As for my final thoughts, guys, look, when I found this series, I was kind of looking for something. Big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. If you missed that somehow. I was looking for something to fill that Buffy-sized hole in my heart that had been there for the 15 years that the show had been off at the time. And outside of just reading Buffy books, I couldn't ever really think of. Now that I've finished Dresden, I've been looking for something to fill that Dresden Files-sized hole in my heart. That's why I talked about some urban fantasy series I wanted to try earlier this year, because I do need me some more Dresden Files. I think what started as a fun little series to kind of take the edge off of Wheel of Time books has now become one of my 10 favorite fantasy series of all time. And to think about some of the contenders for my top 10 fantasy series of all time, and this was able to slip in, that's impressive. Because usually I say legacy takes time with something like that. This was like while I was reading it, I knew I was reading something special. And I was like, this is nothing that I ever would have expected to love this much. And I was like that. I was like, I'm a super serious fantasy reader. I like Lord of the Rings, and I like the Dark Tower. I don't need nothing like that. I needed it. I had no idea how much I needed something like this. And like I said, if someone had sold it to me as it's Buffy and Angel meets John Constantine's Hellblazer, I would have read this years ago. I'd have been anticipating every new release like I am now, because that is exactly some things that I just love in my stories. I think you probably would too. So yes, Jim has been taking a little while for some of these. I'm hoping that he does get back to a quicker writing pace so we can see the ending of this, the conclusion of the story relatively quick, sooner than later. I'm hoping we're not going to be going into 2040 before we see the end of the series. But obviously, I'm going to try to see if I can get Jim to come on the channel again. He came on before. Maybe I can get him to come on again before this book does come out. We can kind of peel his ear back on what his plans are for the series going forward, and if he's got like a time, because I know he is writing other series as well, and see, maybe we can nudge him and just say, hey, well, have you thought about maybe just doing just Dresden Files and then finishing the series? I don't know. I'm not going to push the author who's sold more books than I've probably taken gasps of air in my life. But guys, that is the Dresden Files. I hope you will try it if you haven't. If you have, drop in the comments, guys. Tell me why you love the series. Plenty of people do. And I feel like plenty of people are going to have some really great things to say. Yes, you'll have some people it just doesn't click with. That's going to happen. It might not click for you. But I think more than not, are really going to love this series if you do give it a try. And I would implore you to do so. New graphic audio adaptation coming out. There's the audiobooks are all available right now. I think if you're on Audible Unlimited, I think you can listen to them all really, really cheap. So yeah, definitely do that if that's the way that you want to do it. I know there's some people who are doing a reread of it, as they call it, and they're just listening to them all before the new book does come out in January. That's going to be called 12 Months. But yeah, very exciting times, and we'll probably be talking about the Dresden Files, I think, again before 12 Months does come out in was it January. So guys, drop in the comments, let me know what you think about the Dresden Files, and I will talk to you there.